Welcome to Business Prowess with Raphael and Dr. Andrea. Our show will bring you the best insights, ideas, and inspiration from successful entrepreneurs and CEOs in the business world. Don't miss out on the opportunity to learn from the best and stay ahead of the game. Sifu Raphael is the founder of 5 unique shows. He's a fitness professional, solutions expert, executive coach, and head instructor at Max Martial Arts and Fitness in New York. Dr. Andrea Adams Miller is an award-winning international keynote speaker, best-selling author, and CEO of the Red Carpet Connection Publicity, Publishing, and Talent Agency, and CEO of IgniteYourRelationship.com. Known as the Dream Maker, she makes visionaries' dreams come true, bigger than they ever dare to desire.
Dr. Andrea, how are you? I am so happy to have you back. I know you had an amazing trip. How's everything?
I did. I had an amazing trip, and I actually just was at the airport this morning taking my daughter to go to Mexico as well. So I was in Mexico and was home for 2 days and took her so she could go to Mexico. So there we go.
Excellent. So I'm super excited today. We have 2 amazing coaches, and let's go ahead and bring them on because today we're going to talk about achieve success in today's changing economy. And boy, is it ever changing. Let's go for it. Dominika, thank you so much for joining us. And Ralph, thank you as well. Super happy to have you both here with us. How are you today?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yes,
Doing great, my friend. Ready to share some sunshine with your listeners.
Well, thank you for that.
I love that. Yes. Bring the sunshine. Bring it.
No, don't bring more sunshine. We have plenty in Houston.
Oh, yes, we do there in Houston.
103. We have plenty of sunshine.
There, now I have more sunshine here.
There we go. So let's go ahead and we can round table, if you will. What do you think is making, besides the war and politics, changing people's economy for themselves? I'm going to start it with that. Would like to take that away.
Well, I think we first have to acknowledge that there is a ton of uncertainty going on right now. I think it's fair to say that regardless of who wins the election in November, we are in very uncertain economic times. And truthfully, I think that's because we've spent ourselves into oblivion as a country. And I'm not exactly sure how we come back from that, which that's great from a macroeconomic level, but what does that mean to the individual? So I think we really need to be talking about what can I as an individual do to improve my personal financial situation. And, that's one of the things I talk about on my podcast all the time. Now, I look at things from a Christian perspective as well, so I build a faith into that. But to get started, that's what I really think the issue is. We can't control the macroeconomy. We can't control wars. We can't control, government spending and all that. But what we can do is we can put our own financial house in order. And I think that's one of the things we should really talk about today.
I agree, because it's up to us, right? What we do in our own home, in our community, and even what we do with our lives.
That is absolutely true. And I do agree that we should look at, what we do. And the only thing we can control is what we do, what we think, and what we feel, and nothing else. But I'm going to put a little spin on this because I keep hearing, and I've heard that over the years, we're very uncertain times. The truth is that when you look at, since we have newspapers and media, people keep saying we're in very uncertain times. There's not one year that this statement doesn't show up. And uncertainty is something that we could get comfortable with because it's part of the human experience. There's nothing unusual about this time compared to 20 and 30 years ago for the people who lived then. They would perceive that exactly the same way. Our perception is the key to our success. And very often, when we keep perpetuating the idea of uncertain times and build up fear, we actually prevent people from taking action and venturing out and finding ways to do things for themselves that actually then trickle down, because as we take away a big job from a big company, about 10 different jobs get lost. But guess what? If that company adds one job, about 10 different jobs get added. So it works both ways. It's not one-way street. And I think it's time we start looking from the different perspective, so our brain can actually ground ourselves, and our ability to create can be reinforced instead of held back by fear.
No, I love that. And you're right, because, and I love the fact that you brought it to the attention of the people for that time. Because in the 1950s, they were also saying the same thing that we're kind of saying today. And it's probably going to be said 30 years or 50 years from today. But what do we do? Yeah, what do we do currently for ourselves to not live in that fear? How do we adjust? Dr. Andrea, I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
I'm kind of more on the line of Dominika, and maybe that's because being focused in neuroconsulting and how perception is everything, and how we see things. I find that the clients and the people that I hang around with seem to do really well when other people say the economy's not doing well. And so I think that we're constantly looking at what are the new solutions that we can create that create money in those times. And at the same time, I love what Ralph is saying about us being responsible for ourselves. And certainly I find that people of faith, if they have a community of people that they're around, that they all support and support each other, they tend to do better when things are challenging, because they have people who can keep them in a better mindset of being positive. And yet, if they actually do have some financial challenges, other people can do a hand up to help them, move along more forward. And I just don't think that there's ever been a time that there's not been a war going on. We don't talk about all the war. So there's so many wars. This year, I became aware of other wars that I didn't even know we were having that have been going on for like 100 years. And, we don't even talk about those things. It's quite interesting how things are only news to us for a short time, if at all.
I think a lot of that is because it's what is on the news, right? It's the hottest trend, how we're going to get more viewers. So if you look at any news, it's what's happening to capture the viewers. So are they really sharing the news? No. It's what sells.
You're talking my subject. You're talking my subject because one of my degrees in sociology is analyzing, and it's media and communication. And what we did for 4 years, we literally analyzed the newscasts and information that were presented. And we had 7 different channels to look at. Can I tell you that the same news had nothing to do with the same news on 7 different channels? That's how differently it was presented. Different pictures, different music, different vocabulary, different elements of the news were chosen. So if you were not following the facts, you would not even notice that this is the same thing that they're talking about. And the truth is that what you're saying, one of the ways to answer, when Ralph said, we can only take care of ourselves, turn off the news. Turn off the news. The news is built on fear. The news is built on sensation because it creates certain reactions in your brain, and your prefrontal cortex shuts down, and your basal ganglia and your, some people call commonly reptile brain turns on. Fear goes in, and you're in a heightened mode, and you pay attention. Now, that's not healthy attention. That's not what you should be paying attention to. So if we want to have a better life, turn off the news and start reading the news.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you on that, because I hear what both of you are saying about perception being reality. But the truth of the matter is, reality is when you go to the grocery store and things are 30% more than they were 3 years ago. That's an economic reality. Reality is when you go to fill up your automobile with gasoline, it costs you more than it's cost before. So we can talk about the things that the media is throwing your way, but there are realities that individual people are facing on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I make this statement. And it's a pretty bold statement. I truly believe that by the end of this year, we're going into Great Depression number 2. If you look at the economy of where we are, go back to 1978. Look at where we were in 1978. We had hostages in the Middle East. We had an economic crisis. We had poor leadership in the White House. And I'm not getting political. It's just a fact. And what happened? Interest rates soared. The economy crashed. It actually took the first Gulf War to fix the issue. And all I'm saying is I think people need to buckle up their personal financial lives and get ready for mortgage interest rates being in the teens again. I really do believe that's going to happen. I told my clients 2 years ago that we would see mortgage interest rates triple, and they just about did that. Now, there's monkeying going on right now with the economy trying to get Biden reelected. That's a fact. So I don't believe any of the things I'm seeing in the news on either side right now as it relates to that. But when my wife and I go to the grocery store, here's an example. Last night, I play church league softball. On the way home, my wife sent me a text. She said, Ralph, hey, how about you stop and get us a little bit of ice cream? We'll have a little snack tonight. I said, that's fine. So I stopped at the local convenience store. And for 2 of these little small buckets of ice cream, it was $16. So that's an economic reality. And that's why I say, we have to acknowledge that we are in uncertain times. I'm not disagreeing with that other people have seen uncertainty, but I think right now we are at a place that's almost like a fever pitch. And I don't think the average American realizes how this is going to impact them on their everyday lives. If mortgage interest rates go to 15%, just think about that for a second. Think about what that's going to do to the economy. People aren't going to be able to afford to buy homes. People are going to be renting. People are going to be throwing away money in rental units. Anyway, I don't want to take a deep dive on that, but I'm just saying that's the reality of where I believe we are, and we have to acknowledge that. Now, there are ways to fix that. There's a way of being intentional with your finances, doing budgeting, planning for emergency funds, managing your debt, investing wisely, and developing your skills by listening to programs like this or other podcasts that talk about this. So there are ways for people to fix the problem, but they've got to be aware of it. So that's just my take on that.
Thank you for sharing that, because this is why we have this show, because Dr. Andrea and I believe that it's not just our opinion, it's the opinion of all of our guests. And there's a lot of people out there who you can always chime in on the chat if you want to share your opinion with us, because it is conversations like this that make someone think, wow, what am I doing with my life and how am I helping my community? Because it does start with you first. Then how can I help my neighbor? How can I, listen, if it snowed and my neighbor's elderly next door, should I just watch them struggle or should I go out there and help them out, right? So it's about community involvement as well. It's not just about you because you live in a community. So how can we impact not only our lives, but the lives of others? It always starts with us, right? And I think that's a critical component that we should always consider.
And I say this to clients all the time. They ask me about this very issue. And I say, if your financial house is in order, you're never going to be able to bless somebody else. You're never going to be able to help somebody else. And you're just going to continue to struggle. So you've got to figure out ways that, regardless of what the economy looks like on the outside, and I heard both of you, the other, people talking about that. They're right on point about that. You have to deal with uncertainty, but there are concrete things you can do. I just released a podcast episode yesterday about this, the 5 fundamental reasons for budgeting. It's all about being intentional, making intentional decisions. So even in the midst of uncertainty, we can disagree or agree about perception and all that sort of thing. There are things you can do.
Agreed.
I love that you're passionate about it. So one of the things that it always makes me giggle is I love that I don't think anybody's right or wrong. I think that there's ways to perceive everything that we say based on your life and where you live. I know it makes a difference. I live in a town of 45,000, a county of 48,000. So, when you said, I'm like, what kind of ice cream you buy? That's expensive. I know that, because I'm like, if it's over $4.50, I'm not buying it. And we eat ice cream every day. So I'm not skinny for no reason. So, but I get it. There are things that And at the same time, I think about like when people I know and I see people who buy things, or I observe people that I know who say, I'm broke, I don't have any money. And then there's certain things that they spend a lot of money on. And I've always said that if somebody wants something bad enough, they'll figure out how they're going to purchase it or how they're going to buy it. And we have rental properties. And so having tenants, we see tenants who are like, oh, well, I must have the fanciest car and the most expensive internet and, you know, the highest speed downloading and the most expensive cable and the biggest TV, but they're not thinking about like, oh, I should probably make sure I have money for electricity, water in my house. So my husband goes into the high schools and does talks about that so that people have an idea. Like they have no clue what it costs to live somewhere. So I love your idea of budgeting. I never learned how to budget. I'm 55 years old and I still don't really understand budgeting because it just doesn't make sense to me. So I budget I have an Dr. Andrea budget.
And that's the problem is we do a very poor job in this country of teaching young people and adolescents of how to make good financial decisions. We bankrupt our kids by throwing credit at them. We bankrupt them by throwing all kinds of needs and wants and desires and all those things they gotta have. You're absolutely right. You know, I think about we don't do a good job of teaching them fundamental skills. And those fundamental skills it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple when you think about it. One of the big things I see is most people have no clue where their money goes. How many times have they sat down and written every single spending dollar they spent in the last 45 days? I've done this with clients, and at the end of that time, they go, Ralph, I had no idea I was spending $1,000 a month on Starbucks. And I'm not throwing Starbucks under the bus. I had no idea that my husband and I both are paying for Netflix subscriptions. I had no idea that there was better ways to do things. But if people don't take the time to understand those things, to keep track of those things and make intentional decisions, it's exactly what you said, Andrea. You know, you weren't given that skill set. You do the budget by Andrea, but that's a sure way to fail, because if you don't know where your money's going and you're not allocating it to the things that are important to you, then how are you ever going to find that personal financial success? It's impossible.
Well, I got to tell you, I love Dr. Andrea's budgeting because she lives on a 43 acre
53
farm?
acre.
53, I'm sorry. So you could probably be churning out your own ice cream, Dr. Andrea.
Well, we don't have cows, but we could. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's part of that. And I know Dominika wanted to say something too.
I did. I think one of the things I'm hearing, and absolutely, a lot of people do not know how to budget, but it's hard to teach how to budget if we as adults don't know how to do that. So getting angry about the fact that we are, not budgeting, most adults do not know how to budget. Most adults in America live on credit cards. Most adults follow, the impulse of, I want new shoes, right? And kids multiply whatever they see in our behavior because they perceive that as the correct behavior. And the education is much needed of a revamp. But on the other hand, it is true that, prices are going up. But guess what? Since the beginning of time, they have been. There's nothing new about prices going up. They have been going up in all the countries, not only America, quicker, slower, but they have been. So the growth, it's something we can anticipate. The thing is that we very often don't notice things that are happening to us because we're concentrating on our well-being. And very often finances, which are super important. I absolutely agree that the financial knowledge is necessary to thrive. It's not necessarily that we're throwing anybody under the bus, because we cannot expect people to pass on the knowledge that they don't have. What we can do is advocate, which you're doing, Ralph, great with your podcast. That's absolutely fantastic. But also self-awareness, because we live in a society when we assume that everything is given to us and we deserve everything. The sad news is that we don't deserve anything. We need to get everything and work for everything or make an effort. We deserve respect as a human being. We deserve other things that are non-financial. And when you, Sifu, said about helping others, sometimes being together and helping each other is the way to rise above the average life. Sometimes you don't have to do it alone. And there's a saying, if you want to go far, do it together. If you want to go fast, do it alone. And that's exactly right. See, everybody around us has knowledge. And Ralph, you have different knowledge. Dr. Andrea has different knowledge. Sifa has, and I do too. One thing I would worry about or bring your attention to is the very language that puts this stress and urgency, because fixing your finances, although it's important, there are other things that are playing and learning how to budget. And yes, a lot of people spend money on Starbucks. A lot of people, as Andrea said, spend money on TVs that are, well, not very important, in my opinion. I don't even have a TV. But the truth is that allowing ourselves to budget and learn and enjoy the process and listen to smarter people that have the knowledge, but without the stress that you're going to fail and life is going to fall apart if you don't do it this way, allows people to actually come closer and be intrigued. And being intrigued allows us to learn quicker, just from the neuroscience perspective.
And I agree with you 100%. And that's why my podcast is about faith and finance, because I think the two things go hand in hand. The truth of the matter is, I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, that finance guy just hits me over the head and tells me about all the things I'm doing wrong. I agree. That is not a good approach. I look at it from this standpoint. How can we better steward the resources that we are given? And here's the thing about having faith in that. With faith, there's hope. And you're right. It's not all finances. It's how to make better decisions in general about things that are going on in your life. And I agree with you. It's not just the young people that don't have this knowledge. It's people all across the board. And you're absolutely right in saying that if your parents don't know how to budget, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to know how to budget, because people live what they see around them. So it's time to say, okay, well, how do we fix this? And that's why with my show, I've written a couple books about it. One book called Mastering Your Finances, which is 47 pages about read this book. And it's a starting point. It's not the end. I say this in my podcast all the time. Life is not about a destination. It's about a journey. And that journey is going to take you down roads, but you have to embrace that journey. It's not going to be easy. You are going to make mistakes. But the cool thing about being, the faith component of that is it's not just you doing it. You've got someone walking alongside of you. And I think that's the key to the whole thing. You're absolutely right, Dominika, is that you can't say to people, oh, you're going to fail. Oh, this thing's so terrible. Oh, you're right, because people will just shut down. And that's not a healthy way to go either. But there is a positive message. There is hope for people who want to improve their finances. You can find people to help you get educated. You can find tools that will help you manage your finances, to manage where your money's going. And at the same time, we've got to address a big problem. And that is this everybody needs everything. I need this. I need this. I want this. I want this, right? It's a balancing those wants and needs. We go onto Facebook or we go onto TikTok or YouTube and we see what everyone else has. And, we've got to have that. But how many times do we sit and make intentional decisions about what we need versus what we want?
Absolutely. One of the things that I want to touch upon is negotiations, right? Because we negotiate every decision. We have a choice whether we're going to take it or not take it. When we say yes, we're saying no to something else. Same thing when we say no, we're saying yes to something. So for me, my finances is something I negotiate on a daily basis. Guess what? I am paying less rent today on my 10,000 place I'm sitting in now, 10,000 square foot facility. I'm paying less rent now than I did, same place, I didn't move, than I did in 2016.
Smart.
That's 8 years ago, I paid more money. But it's because of negotiating, of doing the right thing. For this, I'm in a commercial building. It's a shopping center. I figured out how to negotiate. And when you can negotiate something like that, you're probably going to want me to help you in your next negotiations, right? But it's also when you wake up in the morning, how do you negotiate what your day is going to be like? So if you consider every action that we take, That's negotiating. You negotiate. Should I shower today?
I hope we're not negotiating that.
But some people do, right? You know who does a lot? Kids, right? So we have to yell at them, get in the shower, let's go. But think about, do you negotiate? Am I going to buy this TV? Am I going to sit? The minute you purchase that TV, you made a negotiation with, I'm going to become a little bit of a couch potato because now I'm going to enjoy that TV because I paid for it. But we're not really negotiating correctly because that TV, even if they're so cheap now, I go to Costco and I go different places and I see they're like $3,000, like one that used to cost $10,000 or $1,600 for something that used to cost $5,000. And those got cheaper, but what are you really paying for? You're paying for your time to sit and do nothing and absorb all these other energies that are coming into your head to say, hey, maybe I got to go buy that shiny object that I just saw on a commercial. I got to go spend my money here, spend my money there, instead of how can I negotiate my time better? So negotiation to me is everything.
I think before we negotiate, we need to start working on self-regulation, because those conversations will not be happening if we would teach ourselves as adults first, and then our kids what is self-regulation. And that is something that is very challenging right now. People get very emotional and they perceive their perception through emotions, and their emotions is not reality. It's their feeling. They really feel it, but it's not the reality. Yet we now started connecting reality with emotions, and those are two different things. Emotions are just chemical releases from your brain based on an association that your brain made. And what you're talking about, people looking at TV and buying things, those are impulse buys and those are wants. But the truth is, most of us never sat down and asked ourselves, what do I really want? And when I work with my clients, when that question shows up, they go silent for 5 minutes because they don't really know what they want. I mean, they want a happy relationship. Great. What does that look like? And then silence again, because they don't have their own definition of what they're looking for. It's not clear. And everything, money, our lives, our success, starts with clarity. Good questions make better decisions, and we need to learn better questions. But to do that, we need people like Ralph, like you, like Dr. Andrea, or me, who are challenging the audience, our clients and people, to think and dig deeper to see what is really that they're looking for. Because guess what? Success, it can be having a great family and being a housewife, and that's your success. It could be also being a CEO or being on stage with Les Brown. Whatever that might be for you, you need to know what success is for you, because it's your path. And we really don't go into that realm. And before we negotiate, you can't negotiate something if you wanted lower prices, right? You knew you wanted to pay less, so you had a clear outcome in mind. Most people have zero outcome in their head. So I'm going to ask whoever is listening, what do you want and how does it look like exactly? That's the first question we got to start with.
And that's the key to the whole thing. I was on another show the other day and somebody said, how do you define success? And I said, I turned 50 a year and a half ago. I said, if you'd asked me that question 3 or 4 years ago, I would have told you something completely different. Because I would have said, oh, I need a bank account that has this much. I need another car. I need this. I need a beach house. But you know what's funny? As I get older, the things that define success for me are relationships. I'm going to celebrate 24 years of my wife in September. That's priceless to me. I have 2 boys, one of which, it's interesting, Dominika is actually in the U.S. Coast Guard. He's stationed at Station Galveston, so not far from you. That's important to me to have a relationship with him. It's important that one of the things that people ask me about my podcast all the time is, why do you do it? And it's very simple to me. If I can help one person feel better about themselves today. So it's all about filling your emotional bank account. Dominika, you're right. If you don't know what those things look like for you, like I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, I had to have a Corvette. Now, look, I'm a fat guy. Corvettes and fat guys don't go around too well. Like I literally had to watch a YouTube video of how to get into this thing. And I learned there was a technique for this. Well, I got this Corvette, and I'm like, this is fantastic. It's the best thing ever. And guess what? I was empty. And that's the thing. Like, I think that when you realize what motivates you, what fills those tanks, Dr. Andrea has a farm. I raise Black Angus cows on my farm.
Nice.
And the funny thing about Black Angus cows is they are all about needs. They need water. They need grass. They don't want to watch TV. They don't need cell phones. So it's very basic for them. And I'm thinking that what you're saying, Dominika, and I think I'm right on the same page with you, is we need to address individually, and this is different for everybody. What are the things that define success for you? And then you put an action plan together of how to get to that point, because it's different for everybody. And if we don't acknowledge that it's different for everybody, then, hey, as a Christian person, like, I could be a scoundrel and make millions of dollars. I could do it. I have the personality to do it. But I have to be I have to go by my own character. So what matters to me is intentional. So if we can be intentional on what we're doing, then we can make action plans to define it. And that's why I go back to a budget. Your budget needs to define what's important to you. If you're a person that believes in tithing at church, for example, you want to make sure that you're paying God first, then that's important to you. And you're going to build into your action plan. If setting aside money for your kids when you pass away is important to you, you're going to build into that. So it's all about making those intentional decisions. And Dominika, you're absolutely right. Once you decide what is important to you.
One of the things that we have to consider, that success is very different from every person. For example, a homeless person digging in the garbage and they find something to eat, that is success to them, right? Somebody who goes to a very fancy restaurant and get that $1,000 glass of wine, that's success to them. But I found success not too long ago when I was able to sit next to Dr. Andrea and we shared a meal together. That to me was success, because it was in the moment that I was able to sit next to her and we had great communication. We shared it with other people, and that is success. But you sometimes not only have to be intentional, but realize the moment that you're having that success, because that is a beautiful thing. Because a lot of people, they don't realize what's in front of them till it's too late. It's too late. So we need.
And that's another thing I talk about all the time. It's about finding contentment. It's about living in a place of gratitude. And it's about, when it comes down to it, I had a counselor tell me this one time, Ralph, life is about relationships. The most successful people I know are the people who have good relationships. But it's living out that contentment. It's living out that gratitude on a daily basis. Because like you said, that homeless person who comes across some food in the dumpster, that's gold to them. But we have to realize that there's a purpose, but live in that contentment, that gratitude, and it'll make your life so much better. It's just a fact.
Well, I wanted to jump in and thank you for sharing, Ralph and Dominika. I love hearing how you experience life and what you guys do, and the advice and information that you're sharing so that our listeners can form their own opinions for themselves. Sometimes I've had people say to me that I seem to manifest, or well, they just say, you seem to get everything you want, is what they say. But it's I manifest those things into happening. So there are things that we do without, and there's things that are a surplus. So I love to travel. So traveling happens for me. I try to travel frequently, and I don't try, I guess I do. And then there's other things that we do. So we eat economically, so we know where the specials are. We're not above using a coupon. My husband has a thing. He likes to go to Burger King on Thursday, buy one, get one free, whatever, that's his thing. That's what we do. And I'm happy to do that with him. And then there's times that there are things that are important to us. We spend money on going to the theater because the theater is important to us. That's one of our values. We don't have cable vision. We do have Netflix, but that's because we pretty much only watch movies or sitcoms on a limited basis. And it might take us 3 days to watch a whole movie because we only have it in segments. And then like we do have this beautiful farm, but some of it, a farmer rents some of the land. And then some of the other parts of the land, my daughter grows her own hay, rich with alfalfa and clover. And so that offsets the cost for her to have her horses. She's my adult daughter, and her horses live at my house part-time while her grass is growing. And so we get to have the grand horses come over. And, and so there's all these things that, sometimes people have this perception because they hear the amount of property that we have, because it just comes up and like seafood is being funny. Like, I want to go to Andre's house. And I love having people over because if nobody's ever been to a farm or lived on a farm, it's such a beautiful experience. And we don't live fancy poo-poo. I mean, I guess we could, but I'm not a brand person. I'm not a new car person. I don't have any problem with receiving a new car. Just that the car that I have works fine. So why? I don't want a car payment because that doesn't sound fun to me. I'd rather invest in learning and real estate. And we kind of do our finances that as soon as we have money come in, we invest in something else so that it's asset earning. And if you were to look at our taxes, it looks like we don't have anything because we're constantly investing in something else. And I think one of the best things for children is to allow them to have that want or desire and earn it and then be rewarded with receiving it for themselves. Our kids are very entrepreneurial. They saw us and we encouraged them to do things with us. And so they saw, along with philanthropy, they volunteered for things with us. So they had a really good view of work ethics and what it took to appreciate the things that they had.
I love the fact that we're talking about children in our future, because it is so important to educate. And Dominika, you talked about the education system. I think we need to revamp that whole thing, throw it out and start again, because kids don't even know what a checkbook is. Kids are like, what is that? So we need to educate so that we don't go into a welfare system 20 years from now. How many kids that I look at or I help out today are going to be on welfare? Is that what we want our future to be? Or should we teach them the value of money, because all they're doing is they have their heads in their phones? And it bothers me so much when I see a parent with a stroller and the babysitter's in the stroller too. That's the iPhone or the whatever device they have. That's the babysitter. And the kid's not even a year old and they're already playing on this thing. It's like so sad, but we need to get away from that, put those things down, and really refocus on reading a book, on understanding and spending time with our children. We have children for a purpose. And I know a lot of people go, whoops, that was an accident. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Because accidents don't really happen unless somebody hits you. But that was an intention. You had sex with somebody. Hello, we're going to say it plainly. And guess what? There's repercussions that can happen. And so either you take protection or you don't. But an accident then just happened. So we need to take responsibility for our future. If we have children, they come first. We take care of us, right? So we can take care of them. So let's take care of our future.
You touched on so many things. Oh my goodness. Like this is a whole nother 55 different shows, basically.
Do it. Let's do it.
One of the things that I found, and I'm European, I was raised in Europe and I lived in Europe for many, many years. And then I came back to the US. I'm also a US citizen. So I had the chance to also educate my teenage girls that came with me in the US system. And one thing that I have found is that what I am a huge advocate for allowing people to fail, especially when they're young. And the idea of no kid left behind is the worst thing that can happen. And don't get me wrong, people need support. But there have been situations in the American system that would never happen in any other country. Like kids who passed all their courses, they were not allowed to graduate to give another chance to kids who didn't do anything for a whole year. And they were not graduating because of people who chose not to do anything. And don't get me wrong, some of those kids do need assistance, but this should not be punishing people who are doing the right thing. And it seems to be going that way. Also, when I look at our educational system, it is so uncreative, unresourceful, not teaching us how to solve our problems. I am a big proponent of system from Norway, where they're number one for years. And it's actually project education, where kids go, oh, I love this flower. And the teacher goes, fantastic. Let's find out where else the flower grows. And that's how they learn geography. And they go, well, let's count how many petals it has. And how does it happen that it has yellow? So that now we're going into chemistry. So from one flower, you're learning all the subjects, but there's no curriculum. Do you know those kids don't have tests until they're 14, and the only test they have is to see more or less what else do they need? Not to judge them, but to see what else they need to develop. And those kids, when they grow up and they take national tests from all over the world, kids from all over the world take it and compare, they're number one over and over and over again. And that's one thing for education. And education starts actually with parents, but the parents never had the education to pass it on. So it's kind of like expecting things that will never happen. You know, you said about the checkbook. The checkbook is not coming back. We're done. The checkbook is not coming back. So we need to find something else that will be a checkbook, so they will learn how to manage their money. And one of that is not controlling the money that the kids have, so they can fail and finally not get the things that they want. And they got to see, okay, so if I buy myself a candy every day, that means I'm not going to have the shoes that I want. So maybe I have to say no to the candy so I can have the shoes. And the feeling of lack is a growth part. Your brain requires the feeling, the stress of lack, because it then goes into a creative mode and goes, okay, what else can I do? That's where we become entrepreneurial. That's where we start solving problems, not when everything is handed to us. And the idea that we're now perpetuating with giving everybody a trophy for participation, I'm so sorry, but no, you're not getting a trophy for participation. You are getting a trophy if you win because you worked your butt off. And that's why you deserve a trophy. And for showing up. So when I was, one of the things that I did in my past, I was managing as an HR director. And I had a lady who came to me and she goes, we had to let her go. And there was another person in the room. She goes, but I did show up. I'm like, yes, but you're supposed to be here at 8 and you showed up at 11, 5 times in a row. But I did show up. I mean, that should count for something. Well, thank you for showing up, but you were supposed to be here at 8. She could not grasp the idea that her responsibility is to be here at 8 and support her team so everybody doesn't take off the slack. That is part of the society turmoil that we're going through. And it's necessary, because we lived in ages where feelings were totally dismissed. That was not good either. Now we're on the other side where feelings are everything. That's not good either. So we will end up in the middle at one point. But you've touched on so many things that I mean, I could talk forever, but I would love to hear Dr. Andrea, because she opened her mouth a few times and I think she has something amazing to say.
Well, I just wanted to mention, I taught college at 2 different colleges and 7 different departments. And I left teaching, not because I love teaching. I taught everything from 16-year-olds to my oldest student, I think, was 78. So a lot of non-traditional college students as well. But what I found is that the school limited me on what I could teach them, based that they wanted curriculum that was evidence-based. But some of the things that were coming to our students at the time, like I was teaching them LinkedIn and how to do teleseminars and webinars, and I'd get so much pushback. And this was in 2013. And I would get in trouble for teaching them technology and how to go online and how to apply for a school and do an interview on a thing like a Zoom at the time. And and I got so much pushback for it. And I finally decided I needed to leave because I felt like they were actually retarding the growth of these brains by limiting us. You know, how can you teach industrial organizational psychology and not be industrial or organizational? and so I had to walk away from it, and that was very difficult. And I realized that now I can teach my own courses and do all these, you know, beautiful things with people and talk about business and publicity and life changes and family and relationships, and I can teach these courses. It's almost like homeschooling for adults in a way, or homeschooling for entrepreneurs who want to learn and want to be there and don't want to be limited. That's who I love teaching. And I find I'm learning every day too. That I spend so much money on investment in myself, constantly training and learning. And I went to Puerto Vallarta, not for vacation, but to learn more about brain resilience, because that's what I'm passionate about. And so, yeah, that's why I was like, I get excited when we talk about education, because it's out there for us. If you're going to watch TV, learn something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let me interject this. I just filmed an episode this morning that'll play on my podcast next Friday, and it's the 10 ways to get your adult children to leave the nest. And I'll encourage everybody to tune into that. But it talks about some of the things both of you have mentioned, and that is let your kids have the natural consequences of their decisions. You know, let them manage their own money, show them how to live their life, encourage them to be on their own. But most importantly is be a cheerleader for them. Tell them they can do it. Give them positive affirmations. It's one of the things I didn't do a good job of as a dad. Like, it's just a fact. But I'm hoping to do better with my grandkids. But it's one of those things where you've got to prepare your adolescents to be adults. And they're not entitled to anything. And that's what worries me about our generation right now. We're growing up in a generation of entitlement, the instant gratification generation. They want it now. They got to have it right now, but they're not willing to work for it. So anyway, that's my take on that.
I have a 11th one for
all day long. I said that we could read The Little Red Hen all day long.
I have an 11th one for your show, by the way. It's called Change the Locks. I'm just saying.
Well, actually, I had a client that downsized from a 3-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom house. And what they told me is this way the kids can't move back, Ralph. I said, well, that works.
Now, see, I'm giggling because our 2 youngest children, they were going to build onto our house and instead found another house and moved to it. And we enjoyed having them here so much because we thought it was great. So I actually was asking her last night, so when are we re-looking at them moving back here? But they're independent. They do their own thing. But because all 3 of our daughters are just so amazing with how they show up in the world, I would want them all to live on the same property as us. And I think and I kind of like that whole idea that some people are getting more communal and sharing resources. It just makes life easier.
I have 2 adult daughters. They moved out 3 years ago. They're 24. They're doing fantastically. And the amount of knowledge they gained by living on their own with their own money, the growth was exponential. So now helping them is in a very different, configuration. And there's the entitlement and I need and I want, it never was there, but now it's totally gone. And it's all, even perception of mom, are you able to do that? Is that, going to take away from anything you want to do? That question would have never showed up, a few years back. They would be like, okay, cool, give it to me. Which is absolutely also normal. Our kids are supposed to go through those stages. And one thing that Dr. Amen says, who is my coach, Dr. Daniel Amen, is that to build resilience in the brain, do not fix your kids' problems. Be next by and allow them to fix their own problems. And that's how you build resilience and ability and grit, which is actually the basis of success. It's not your talent, it's your grit. It's doing things as prescribed when you don't feel like it. And we need to learn that as adults and teach to our kids.
We do. Well, this has been an incredible show and we ran out of time. So you're right, Dominika, we need to do more shows and have you come back. Thank you for such great insights. And I love that we all have differences of opinion, but we can all agree on one thing. We need to do more shows. We need to impact more people because a lot of people in this world, whether they live in the US, Russia, Canada, Uganda, it doesn't matter. We all need to come together and unite so we can have a future and a bright one. So thank you everybody for being here with us. Dr. Andrea, any last words you'd like to share with us?
I just want to remind people, whether it comes to budgeting or education or whatever it is, relationships, what it boils down to is making your priorities visible to yourself and aligning your world into that so that you can manifest what you desire.
All right, everybody, have an exceptional rest of your day. And by the way, if you're around at 1 o'clock, I'm doing an amazing show with Jose Escobar called Heroes Rising. And we look forward to seeing you guys there. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me.